Hey, it's Brian and Tony from the Meat Speak podcast, and we'd like to invite you to join us in support of restaurants everywhere as part of our restaurant challenge being issued by the Certified Angus Beef brand. It works like this. Go out to dinner, snap a picture and share your experience, and use the hashtag Restaurant Challenge, all one word, and be entered to win one of the many $100 gift cards we'll be giving out each week that you guessed it, turn around and go right back out to feast at more of your favorite restaurants. Also include the tag of that restaurant in your post, and you enter them a chance to win $2,500 for their staff.
Hey, restaurants have really had a tough go and could use all the support you can give. Of course, giving them additional business is always great, but you can also support them through positive reviews, tipping generously, or simply popping in to tell them how much you appreciate them during these difficult times. On behalf of chefs everywhere, I can promise you that any effort made is greatly appreciated. For more information, visit challenge.certifiedangusbeef.com.
Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand, coming to you via Zoom, although I am in the inner sanctum of the basement of Certified Angus Beef here in Northeast Ohio. Our guest today is a noted television personality, author, sushi maker, recovering competitive eater whose works include America the Edible, The Traveler's Guide to Life, Adam Richman's Best Sandwich in America, and perhaps most recognized, Man versus Food, of course, where he not only tackled some of the most gigantic and incredible foods, but you also beat me to my career aspirations. That is as a former spokesperson for Zantac. What's more, he's a huge fan of the beautiful game and is part owner of the mighty Mariners of Grimsby Town, currently in the fourth tier of English football, and of course the biggest Tottenham Hotspur supporter of this side of the Atlantic, Jose Mourinho's Barmy Army. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Adam Richman. How you doing, sir?
Thank you. And Grimsby is actually in the third. They're in League Two now. So we left the Blue Square Premier League. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Just a shareholder. But yes, I'm honored. I'm very impressed by the research, by the way.
Thank you very much. I'm a little upset that I missed that little nugget because.
Oh no! Look, Grimsby. I became a fan of really randomly. This is the truth. First press junket going to England to promote Man versus Food. On the flight back, someone had recognized me, and I said, "Listen, I don't mean to be rude, but I got to make a fantasy football trade." So he says, American football, proper football. And I said, well, they're both proper in my mind, but what you're referring to is proper football. Who do you support? I support Spurs. Who do you support? He said, well, because of where I live, it'd probably be this team, but I support a little team called Grimsby. And he tells me this amazing story about like how this department store in town, in this cannery, they've leveraged every penny they can towards this team. And he tells me about their trials and tribulations. And it just was like so cool. And to me, it was like the spirit of the game. So I never thought I'd be a shareholder of a football team, let alone, sponsor one team and be a shareholder in another like I am now. So it's pretty cool. So yeah, shout out the Mariners and shout out the mighty Broadley FC of Lincolnshire.
I would love to talk about the beautiful game all day long. I myself am a Newcastle United supporter. Long story on that. But
on the tune.
Wait, lads. That said, I want to talk to you about something else that we both have in common, and that is eating food and cooking food. You've done an awful lot of things. Actually, there were a couple things that popped up on your IMDb. I didn't realize you were on, Days of Our Lives? Or no,
I was on Guiding Light and All My Children.
That's it. I had no idea, right?
With a face made for radio, I managed to get on soap operas. But, because I haven't had a cheekbone my whole life, that naturally I was like supporting characters. I wasn't Raul, the pool boy, who like comes back. Oh, Raul, we thought you were dead. And then he kisses some girl named Chloe as they fade to commercial. No, that wasn't me. I was like one of the supporting regular people that they like put in to make the other people look pretty. They're like, hey, you know, they're like, wow, Fred Savage looks terrible, but Jay Leno looks great.
Fred Savage. That's the first time there's been a Fred Savage reference, Jeff, in the history of this podcast.
Nice. Usually, but it depends on like the level of chubbess that I currently, and because you know, obviously carbohydrates in quarantine got me feeling some kind of way. I look a little bit like, you know, like I don't know. I guess Ursat's Fred Flintstone, but I also have to acknowledge that when I shave, I do bear a very close resemblance to human Shrek. In fact, this is a poster from the first event I did at New York Food and Wine called Brooklyn's Bounty. And I think you can see there's a little bit of human Shrek in there. Just, I'm an ogre. Just a little bit. There's human Shrek.
You got to embrace it, though, right?
I absolutely do. I just got to find my Fiona, and I'm golden.
All right, so let's talk about this. You are at your core. You're a New York boy. You're a Brooklyn boy, right?
Sir. Yes, sir. New York all the way.
OG Brooklyn boy. How did you go from Brooklyn? Obviously, you went to Emory down in Atlanta. You were on soap operas, and then somehow you're on this show that just kind of blew up called Man versus Food. How did point A get to point Z in there?
So I can sometimes get long-winded with this one, so I'm going to try to like see if I could do this quickly without boring your listeners to death. So in a nutshell, I was always told I was going to be a doctor because I'm a Jew from the Northeast. I did Westinghouse projects and advanced placement sciences, blah, 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 blah. Went to Emory largely for that reason, realized that for the amount of work required, I just didn't have a passion for it anymore. I was much more creative. I was into languages, into international studies, travel, cultures, stuff like this. Switched my major to international studies. I speak French, I speak Hebrew, I speak a little bit of Japanese, and was really into history. And I have a weird archival mind, like I can remember stuff like this. Anyway, I started a food journal randomly in 1995 in the wake of a really crap breakup. And because I'm not a food critic by any stretch of the imagination, but I can only write my reactions. So it started as just like this entry, you know, me like pissing and moaning over my breakup. And then all of a sudden I realized like I was writing about the restaurant I was at and the food and how it made me feel and the decor and the waitress and stuff. And it came out naturally. And I realized, you know something, as long as I'm not trying to do like this erudite, like service, I give it a 29. Food, I give it a 28. Like that's the Zagat's and that's cool. That's their lane. And so then I loved it because, you know, one of the reasons, like I had gotten into University of Chicago, for example, another fine school, but I came from a big, cold metropolitan city. I didn't want to exchange it for another one. And so for me, Atlanta was so different in every way, but also the great thing is there's the perimeter of Atlanta, there's 285, and then there's the greater Atlanta area. And so I was blessed. I was there 94 to 96. I got a World Series, Super Bowl, and an Olympics. So you had lots of international information. Delta's there, Xerox is there, Coca-Cola is there. So they're all growing. Anyway, I'm not doing what I said. Let me accelerate. What does Inigo Montoya say? Let me explain. No, it is too long. Let me sum up. So I do this food journal, and I found a tremendous amount of catharsis doing it. So then I used to just go on drives. I've always, as an only child and a bit of a weirdo, I didn't always roll with a big pack of people. And so I would go to like random church barbecues in Peachtree City or in Jonesboro. I would go to Marietta, go to Roswell, go to, not New Mexico, Georgia, go to different places in Little Five Points, in Clayton, and Decatur, down by the airport, and literally just explore. You know, I never would have found Daddy D's barbecue on MLK and Freedom Parkway. I never would have gone to the Whistle Stop Cafe for fried green tomatoes. I never would have really seen people cooking with an old oil drum and learning these things. And so I started this food journal, started acting in Atlanta as a non-union actor. And because the cost of living, and, you know, before my buddy, so I'm friends with Killer Mike, and, you know, he's always talked about, you know, how it's really become this amazing mecca for young Black entrepreneurship and for modern African American excellence, which I think is amazing. And in fact, I attended Clark University on a program called the Host Broadcast Training Program for the '96 Olympics. So I got a chance to actually then explore the HBCU area and eating at soul food restaurants on Abernathy off the 20 and where the Morehouse students went and stuff. So that Atlanta was not as expensive as the modern Atlanta. So I could live there and work there as an actor and supplement this food journal. Flash forward, I moved back to New York, tried to pound the pavement as an actor there, decided I need an agent, realized graduate school is the best way to do it. Apply, and I've been doing survival jobs at Myriad restaurants, learning more food, get into Yale, go to Yale Drama from 2000 to 2003, the whole time, each summer, trying to find restaurant work. And my stepmom had gotten my sushi training as a gift for me, as a gift for getting into Yale. So shout out to Mia's Sushi on Howe Street in New Haven. Bun Lai, really terrific guy who runs it. I interviewed with him, and before I found out that financial services at Yale doesn't allow you to have an outside job. And he says, I got to ask, you're a white Jewish kid. What made you become a sushi chef? I go, well, my pop and I were always going to do it, but he passed before I had a chance to. And I said, and to, get chicks, like to meet girls and like that. Yeah, I can make a sushi. And literally, he doesn't even blink. He's like, it's better than being a rock star, isn't it? I was like, yeah, it's pretty damn good, man. It's good stuff. So, because not everyone looks at me and they're like, you're a Jew making Japanese food? What's your restaurant called? Sosumi? But anyway, so I did this. Came out of Yale in 2003, started doing regional theater, but it kept up that food journal. So I every regional theater gig I did, I learned. I did a show, I spent a summer at the Jersey Shore working at a theater there, and I got a chance to explore Holmdel and Sandy Hook and West Long, Monmouth and whatever, and learning those places. So then Pound the Pavement, so on and so forth. 5 years out of Yale, I decide, because I put myself on a 5-year plan like Stalin, and I said I needed to transition, was working in television, and I read a very impactful book. I'm not getting any kickback on this, but the book was called The Renaissance Soul by Margaret Lobenstein, Life Designed for People with Too Many Passions to Pick Just One. I appreciated the fact that this book was not full of esoteric hippy dippy. It was very much about brass tacks. Like it was almost like a workbook. There were like exercises that you had to do. So one of them was like a reverse flow chart where you sort of like, you took your skills and interests and then you kind of could ascertain how they could merge into and coalesce into a profession. Because that to me is like, if I could find a nexus where passion and profession collide, that's my sweet spot. And it was this thing about performing and the medium of television and food creation, food. And I was like having a food show, a food exploration show, using the languages, using that stuff, et cetera, so on and so forth. So my commercial agents that I signed with out of Yale, shout out CESD, they had periodically sent out emails, like industry, like agency-wide emails, like Discovery Channel needs blonde Spanish-speaking scuba diver or something, you know what I mean? And so I used to always like skip them, pass them. So for some reason, I opened this particular one, and it said, Travel Channel looking for someone who knows regional food, has kitchen experience, has camera experience, likes to eat a lot, likes traveling and has travel experience, and can describe flavors and like can accurately describe flavors or something like this. So there was a wonderful casting director in New York named Barbara Barna, and I remember my agent said they'll have some foods there. They'll have like potato chips, pickles, whatever else, because they want to see how you describe flavor, but you can bring your own food. I went to an amazing, I'll never forget, because I was on the unenjoyment at the time. And I went to this amazing burrito place that no longer exists because I got a mole burrito. Because I figured I could talk about mole and chilies and chocolate and Oaxaca. I went in, and as anyone who's ever auditioned for anything will tell you, you have to be right on that razor thin line of cockiness and confidence. And what did Muhammad Ali say? Bold, cocky, confident, beautiful. And I went in and I said I said to Barbara Barney, like I did my spiel, and I memorized lines really quickly. So they had a board of what basically was the type of read I would do at the beginning of a segment on Man versus Food. Like, I'm here at the Salt Lick Barbecue in Driftwood, Texas. Now, there's not a lot of open pits left in the United States, but one of them is right here, just 25 minutes outside of Austin, where Scott Roberts and his friends are using Asian flavors and Texas flavors and a whole bunch of live oak, that kind of intro. So I watched. All right, so I'm gonna keep it 100. I don't know if I've ever said this on a podcast before, but we're friends. I used to get pirated. I used to live in my current office was my old bedroom. Someone else lived in this apartment, and I used to get illegal Food Network, and I kid you not, Court TV. Those are like the two channels I was able to get that weren't broadcast, and so I was just like watching Food Network like a zombie. And so I knew how these intros were meant to be structured and tempo. So she shows me a sample read. It may have been a fictional place. I don't recall what it was, but I memorized it rather quickly and I delivered it the way I do. And then she was like, that's pretty good. I said, thanks. She goes, well, what food did you bring? So then I talk about the burrito, talk about mole, how it's chilies and chocolate, how biochemically it mimics what you feel when you feel love. Talk about Oaxaca. I make a circumcision joke as I took the tip of it off, whatever. And then she's like, so tell me, where do you like to eat around the U.S.? I hadn't told her about the Food Journal. So I go, pick a region. And she's like, okay, Slick, you're from Brooklyn, right? I said, yeah. Tell me you got the Midwest. And I was like, clickety, 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 click. Like I was like naming places in Minneapolis, in Cleveland, in Wisconsin. And then it was a 6-round process from there. And I did my final screen test with, I think, 6 other people at Katz's Deli. And I had gone the day before, interviewed everyone, and bought a T-shirt. And I wanted to make it look like I had it for a while. So I went home, and I was so broke. Like, buying this T-shirt, like, crushed me. And then I cut the neck of the T-shirt out, and there's a laundromat on my corner, and I remember again spending $5 like to launder it, but to launder it really, really make it look washed and worn, right? I wear a black hoodie and I do one of those intros. Now at this point, the show's called Pig Out. And I was like, I am not gonna host a show called Pig Out. And so it's Valentine's Day. I remember this very clearly. Valentine's Day 2008. I walk in. There's a competitive eater, because I'm not a competitive eater, never have been. There's a real competitive eater named Coon Dog that I remember seeing like the Nathan's thing or whatever. Dude's got, and no disrespect to you, Coon Dog, should you ever listen to this. He shaves his head. He's got like a mohawk of hair. I'll never forget this. Walks up to me, his mohawk man goes, Coon Dog, you have beautiful eyes. And I was like, thank you. They told us we needed to do an intro. And I'm an actor. I'm a Yale-trained actor. So I had rehearsed it within an inch of my life, had more facts that they had given us in the brief. I was quoting Tom Lehrer's songs. I knew that it had been across the street. I knew which presidents had eaten there. John Glenn asked for the pastrami when he was on the launch pad during his Mercury mission. Like I knew random factoids about it. I knew why. Like if you've ever been to Katz's Deli, you know that there's a neon sign that says Katz's, that's all. That's because Leon Katz, when he ordered the neon, they said, what do you want it to say? He said, Katz's, that's all. And he's like, I just meant Katz's. I didn't even have to put that's all. It was unnecessary. So I knew this stuff. And Dan Adler, who would go on to become my showrunner, my friend, and he's the genius behind 90 Day Fiance. So Danny was behind the camera, and I do the read, and I'm selling it. And I remember, and there was like Man versus Food was sort of an image that they had given, like this is the vibe of the thing, and I keyed in on that. So I went, this is Valentine's Day 2008. It's a new Valentine's Day massacre on the Lower East Side between man versus and this one is man versus food. And I go, oh, and if you think that I'm reading this off a cue card, or if I'm just a big fan of Katz's, I'm like, this is my T-shirt. Big fan. And then I walk inside. I come around. I say to Dan, and I look, and I see the cameraman doing this. And I look up, and Danny looks up from his monitor, and he's looking at me like you know what I mean? It's almost like Morpheus, like he's starting to believe. And like so Danny looks up from the monitor, and he's like nodding. And I go, "You want a second one?" And Dan's like, "No, man. I think we got it." And I was like, "Oh shoot, I appreciate you." So then all of a sudden the cameraman grabs me, bless his heart. He goes, "That was really good. Usually we've been doing like 67. We've never gotten 101. That was terrific." I said, "Thanks." I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself. So I know all these facts. And because I had been there the day before, I remembered people's names. So it seemed like it was like Norm. Like I went through, I'm like, "Hey, what's going on? Julio, how you doing, man? Hey, what's going on, Juan?" And and I know Katz's because my grandfather grew up on the Lower East Side. So flash forward, this is much longer than I thought I was going to be, and I'm terribly sorry, Brian.
You were just fine.
So anyway, that's what they all say. Then they never call. And then the upshot was, so I do this, and it led to a few more rounds of like they needed to see reference materials, my cooking resume, my acting resume. They wanted a couple of the entries from my food journal. And I said, I'm only going to give you the ones I mentioned because this is my stuff. Like I may publish this. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I do that. And I showed them I have these crazy old school accordion files. So like I'll rip stuff out of magazines and put it under stuff. And like that to me is like, oh no, that's like the Tesseract. Like I'm going to guard that shit. And so I go down the road with Matt Sharp and Dan Adler. And they basically say, essentially, I'm at McDonald's on 7th Avenue using their free internet, waiting for my shift at Madison Square Garden Television as a logger, making $70 a shift, not an hour. And I'm there just waiting for my shift. And then I get a call, and they're like, "Dude, so basically you have the job provided there is a job to have. So we're going to shoot something called a sizzle reel." All right. So we shot it all in Brooklyn. I had a suitcase of clothes, and we would fake other states. And so basically I would have like a gingham shirt, walking, so cold my nipples could cut glass. And I'm walking in a gingham shirt in cold Brooklyn against the brick wall, like I'm in North Carolina on the search for some of the best NC barbecue and da-da-da-da-da. And then we would go to like a barbecue place, and there would just be a shot of me doing this. I'd run into a bathroom, I'd change, I'd put on like a shearling coat, walk against a cyclone fence or against an ambiguous urban cityscape and go, I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, looking for a da-da-da-da-da. Change again, different army jacket and stuff like, hey, I'm in Philadelphia. I want to find the best cheesesteak and whatever. And that day was arguably more eating than almost the whole series. And it was just like, I had to taste this. And then they had to fake challenges. So then I had to I tried this thing called the Suicide Six Wings Challenge, which I eventually put in the Brooklyn episode of Man vs. Food. And that was hell on earth. So I shot it. We shot the sizzle trailer. They loved it at Sharp, who made the show, Sharp Entertainment. And it was a great experience, but I had no idea what was happening. So then Matt Sharp and Dan left me a very sweet message. They said, well, listen, we're taking it to Travel Channel in DC on May 1st. We'll know something around then. We'll let you know. And if not, we love you. You've been a joy to work with, and hopefully we'll work on something else, if not this. I said, okay, but naturally you're like, May 1st comes and goes. I don't hear from them all day. So I go to the bar across the street from my house, and I get legless drunk, like literally the type of like Charles Bukowski kind of depressed, where you're like resting your head on the pint glass. And I'm drinking shots of Jameson, drinking Guinness. Just, I don't know. I should have gone to med school. So I wake up in my basement apartment, and I had an LG, like a flip phone. And I see the little light blinking. And I wake us in the afternoon, and it's Matt Sharp going, "Hey, dude, what's up? We're so sorry. We had your cell phone number wrong by 1 digit. Give me a call back on this number." And it was not the number I had been calling, so it must have been Matt's direct line. And I call, it doesn't even ring. I guess he had caller ID. And I pick up the phone, and he's like, "You ready to be a star, dude?" I said, "What?" He's like, "They dimmed the lights. We showed them the trailer. We did our presentation. We showed them the trailer, and then Pat Young, the president of the network, said, 'Well, this is obviously a show. We'll take 10 episodes.'" And I was like, "What?" They're like, "You're going to be hosting a TV show, 10 episodes of a new TV show on Travel Channel." And then I let loose with this like war whoop, like, Johnny Drama, like, "Victory!" I do the thing, and then all of a sudden the hangover just hits me in the head. I drop to my damn knees, and I'm like, "Thank you guys so much." And so at that moment, it was kind of a few things kind of fell into place. I booked, and feel free to YouTube this, I did a Bank of America NASCAR Visa card commercial before Man vs. Food. I had booked this show at Virginia Stage called Indoor Outdoor, which I sadly had to drop out of. And then I was doing this show called Walls, written by a friend of mine at Yale, to Cherry Lane Theater in New York. And shot the pilot in Memphis. The pilot tested well. And by episode 3, which was the Don Juan Taco Challenge at 1 in a Million in Austin, Texas, they were like, "Well, we love you. Are you having fun?" And I said, "Yes." "Well, we'd like to keep having fun with you. We'd like to buy 8 more episodes." And then so Dan Adler pulls me aside and says, "Dude, we've never gotten a pickup that quickly." And then towards the end of the season, they said, we want to keep doing this. You want to keep doing this? Season 2. You want to keep doing this? Season 3. And there you have it.
So one of the questions, and I apologize, I am positive this is probably one that you've answered a billion times, right?
Come on, Brian. It's all good. We haven't got it like that. Come on.
Well, the things that you would consume, I mean, how in the world, I get asked this a lot because I just eat a lot because I work for a beef company, right? You do it on television. How in the world do you manage that? Do you physically manage that? And at what point does it just get to be like, I don't know if I can do this anymore?
Well, the thing was, the big misconception is, God forbid, I had some kind of physical ailment that prevented me from doing it, when realistically, I didn't want to fall into the trap where my only perceived value was as the happy, fun eating machine. But before the big quantity challenges, I would not eat for a while. And then Joey Chestnut, who I filmed with in San Jose, gave me a really great tip. He would pound a gallon of water in about 5 minutes, and it would stretch your stomach out. And then I would do that the night before, or maybe the morning of, and you feel like crap, but through respiration, perspiration, peeing, whatever, you lose the water, but your stomach's been stretched. And then I would do shoulder-loaded squats with, I remember this vividly, I'd put in foam books, I'd put in shoes, I would use some of the ballast weights, like the sandbags we had for the cameras. I'd borrow them. I'd put in, shoes, the Gideon Bible for my hotel room, whatever it took. And I'd put my suitcase on my shoulders, and I would do shoulder-loaded squats. And then I would do upright rows with my suitcases, because your back and your legs are your biggest muscle groups. The more muscle mass you have, the higher your metabolism. And then I would do I had seen a friend of mine who's a professional driver he does like invisible jump rope. Like, so you jump rope as though you're jumping rope, but you don't have one. So it's just, so I did like fake skipping. And then I would do, before the Amarillo, Texas one, I did like suicide sprints in the parking lot. So you touch a line. And like people were like telling like the front desk, like, I think there's a crackhead in the parking lot he's like running around the parking lot. And because remember, the show hadn't aired yet. And I remember we were on Amarillo television, and they called the show Man versus Steak. And I'm like, no. And I remember the male newscaster was like, that's gross. I was like, we're off to a shining start, boys.
Of all the places that you would expect people would at least appreciate that, Amarillo, Texas.
Right. Well, that's the funny thing is because that's one of the biggest, most iconic challenges is the Big Texan,
Oh, yeah.
And they'll even pick you up at the airport in a limo and drive you there for the 72-ounce steak. And it's, the old 96er in the Great Outdoors that John Candy eats is based on that steak.
Yeah.
And, again, I apologize if it's TMI, but that was the one and only time in my life I've ever been asked for a courtesy flush. Not happy about that, but, you got to live life like the truth is true.
That's right. It's real life, brother. I remember we were in Amarillo, Texas, and I've been there many times. I've seen the big statue, and we were with a good friend of ours who used to be the corporate chef of Saltgrass Steakhouse, and another guy was with us who maybe weighed 95 pounds. He was a chef from Barbados who was in with us, and on their last day, Rick, who was with Saltgrass, decided to take Will War from Barbados down to do the Big Tex, and apparently he held his own. So, physical stature isn't everything
at all. That was the thing they kept telling me because they were lovely, lovely people. But I'll never forget. They were like, "Yeah, a little old lady did it, and she had a piece of pie afterwards and put on her lipstick and walked off the stage." So. And I remember when they brought this thing over and it looked like, the Gutenberg Bible made of beef. And I was just like, oh, man. Because it's called the culotte, So if before they butterfly it, it looks like the entire cone of meat at a gyro place. Like when they're doing the souvlaki. It's that gigantic thing. It's the culotte, it's the and then all of a sudden, so luckily I kind of knew the muscle groups, the primal cut somewhat well, so I knew, because they don't require you to eat the gristle. So I knew that dead smack in the middle was going to be a gristle line, so I cut, but I was trying to be a little shysty, and I cut out some of the people. I'm like, no, it's gristle. And I remember they came back, and I said, this is not gristle. No, this is not. And they hand me something about the size of like a Costanza wallet, and they're like, no, you're eating, And but they gave me, he did say, here's what's worked for some other people. So they gave me a bunch of different sauces to fight flavor fatigue, which was something that I would come to rely upon. And then he actually, and I wasn't eating, and so my color, I was really wan and pale. And I remember they said, Adam, would you eat a French fry or some shit, please? I'm like, I'm not eating anything until the challenge. And then he said, listen, I'm going to give you a glass of really good Burgundy. And he said, not only will it settle your nerves, it'll make your mouth crave the beef. And it absolutely did. It absolutely did. And I've always been enamored of pairing and the sort of magical ratatouille-ness of whatever that third compound is created in your mouth. And it has subsequently been like a linchpin of my brand, is creating branding menus. I've done it for everything from Jim Beam to Mike's Hard to a wine company in Argentina. It's what I'm very facile at. I flatter myself to think I'm pretty damn good at it. So for me, that Burgundy and the richness of this beef and the way it's like offset with like starchy potato, and then it's a different kind of sugar, and then you can take that, and then Roquefort dressing, and how does Roquefort, that blue cheese, work with beef? That kind of funk mimics a little bit of that dry age funk, and they work together. The cool thing, I'm going to take a little bit of a detour, and this is the truth because for you lovely listeners, Brian was kind enough to send me a package of meat before a demo I did during the pandemic at-home New York Food and Wine Festival, and it turns out we share a love of one of the same cuts, which is the Spinellis. And for those of you who don't know, the way I describe the Spinellis, tenderness of a fillet with the character of a ribeye. Fair?
Oh yeah, it's so packed with, for lack of a better term, fat. It's the best part. I think everybody knows it. They don't know they know what it is. It's that part of the ribeye that you always save for last because it's that good, right?
That's magic. That's magic. Yeah. So that was, and And it was interesting because there were a few subsequent steak challenges in Man vs. Food. We went to a place called Steak and Maine in Maryland. And the problem was they had to keep reheating it. With each subsequent reheating, it was more like shoe leather as you went on. But, that's the hard part. But yeah, some of those things, it wasn't a matter of taking a toll. Like, I had the hardest ones were those first 10 episodes because I didn't get a break. Eventually, when I got to be a little bit more valuable to the network and they were a little bit more understanding of me, I could say, listen, can we shoot a half day of like city B-roll the day before the challenge so I have the second half of the day to prepare, and then the day after the challenge I just need a little recovery time, because otherwise they had me on the pilot attempting a burger literally the size of a bar stool cushion and the thickness of it, and then I had to go to Gus's Fried Chicken the next day. And it was just like, come on, y'all. Like, this is just insane. I remember vividly filming in Little Rock at an amazing barbecue spot called Mean Pig Barbecue, owned by a guy named Buddy Merritt. And then damn near getting habanero poisoning. And I had to be treated with oxygen. Like, I'm like sucking on oxygen in the walk-in freezer. And then I had to go home and like pack my luggage and get on an airplane the next day. And you're like, yeah, that's right. Being crammed into a plane in like turbulence. That's exactly what I want right now.
While you're recovering. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's just, that was the thing. So it wasn't so much that it was like lingering effects in terms of my decision to move on from it. I just think that I have a little bit more to bring to the table other than my capacity to crush a bunch of food.
Amen. One of the things that I've always thought identifies you as our kind of people, and I say our kind of people, Certified Angus Beef, my co-host, but also all our listeners, is there was a rumor floating around that you had gone vegan, and you went out of your way to say, I am not a vegan.
Well, here's the thing. As we talked about in the very beginning, it's like, we come full circle. I had an opportunity to play in maybe the biggest sort of pro-am soccer game in the world called Soccer Aid that raises money for UNICEF in England. And it happens every couple of years. And so it was 2012. I was really unhappy with the way I looked. And people think that I gained all the weight on Man vs. Food. It wasn't, because the challenges kept me honest. It's when I started doing Man vs. Food Nation and I didn't have challenges to train for that I was just eating. The thing was I would like eat on camera and then I'd eat lunch with the crew. And it was almost like, oh, well, those calories don't count. Those are work calories. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just ballooned. And so I embarked on this weight loss mission in 2012. And then I ultimately was like, no, this is a good goal. 2014, I'm gonna drop the weight for. And the last few months of that training, I did adopt a vegan diet, but it was for that event. My trainer, Nikki Hollander, mandated it because he knew that it would really result in rapid weight loss. And he is from Archway, London, and he was like, mate, lighter bodies will travel faster and jump higher. So he's like, get lighter, mate. So I did what I could to get lighter. And so adopting a vegan diet was then. So what had happened was this awful reporter from, I want to say she was with the Daily Mail. She said, would you ever be a vegan? And I said, I actually went vegan for about 5 months in training for Soccer Aid. And then naturally she titled the article, Adam Richman from Man vs. Food is, you'll never guess, a vegan now. Because that's more clickbaity than Adam ate vegetables for 5 months. And so yes, and I'll never forget the sheer stupidity that ensued. Like, if I defended myself, people were like, so I took a picture with a double animal style from In-N-Out in Westwood, California. And I had quoted Mark Twain. I said, the reports of my veganism have been greatly exaggerated. And I said, come on, guys. Newspapers just want clicks. I said, they just want to sell papers. I said, I'm an omnivore. So I remember one girl was like, that's so obnoxious. You should just say that. No one cares. And it's like, well, obviously they care. My network cares. And I never forget one woman was like, what's an omnivore? Also, is it true you're a vegan? And I was like, lady, they allow you to have children? Oh, so, I think, and then I remember when I lost weight, people were saying, you were like my food hero. Now you've turned your back on food. It's like, turned my back on food? That's like saying I turned my back on oxygen. Like, I still eat. So, that was the thing. So you're right, I had to go out of my way, especially because I was about to host a barbecue show in England. And ITV was like, yeah, we're having an issue here because he's about to host a primetime barbecue show, but people think he's a vegan. I remember I went to Veggie Grill in Westwood Village, and I was like getting like something like not healthy, like buffalo cauliflower or something like that. And I remember this girl like, oh, that's right, you're a vegan now. And I was like, I am not. She's like, but you in a vegan restaurant. Because I want fried cauliflower. I'm not in here asking you for quinoa and amaranth. Right. I mean, just something semi-healthy to like, just get me from here back to West Hollywood. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, do we have to have labels, people? Come on.
I just think that it's about balance. And the truth of the matter is, a good steak dinner, I don't know, maybe it's a guy thing, maybe it's the way I was raised, but part of a good steak dinner, they're always, whether it's as decadent as cream spinach, or if it's as simple as sauteed spinach or broccoli, or, I think that there's always that wonderful potato element. So whether you're going to Peter Luger's and having the Dutch style potatoes, or having really great French fries, and then some kind of a green, and then whatever. And like, to me, I need like a nice little glass of water, and I need some kind of red wine, and then I got to finish it with some kind of bourbon. You know what I mean? Because like, there is something about bourbon and beef, red wine and beef. And to be fair, one of my big beef marinades I make is like, if I'm using something like Top Round, that isn't very marbled, but for those of you listening, especially when I didn't have a ton of cash to play with, it's usually a cheaper cut. You get quite a bit for your buck, and a very lean, healthy cut of meat, and it lasts quite a while. I know some people call London broil or whatever, but I would put it in a gallon Ziploc with just about equal parts of coffee, red wine, balsamic and soy, fresh cracked pepper, and 3 smashed cloves of garlic, and I would just leave it in there and let it imbue with the flavor. And then I'd actually, sometimes if I did it on the grill, I'd pour that over it, kind of do like a, what do they call it, a Pittsburgh, when they put the butter on the coals to steam up.
Yep.
And I would drizzle it over. But I think that's the beautiful thing with beef, is that I think a lot of people feel it's heavy, or it's only good, ground up in a burger form, or like you could do salt and pepper. And, to be fair with the certified Angus, and I am not a paid spokesperson for, we're friends, but I mean it in earnest. I cooked for someone on New Year's and made your gorgeous fillets, and it would be a travesty to put anything other than salt and pepper on those. But I think that you should play with flavor. You should play with temperature. Cold steak on a salad is delightful. In a wrap, it's delightful. But also, you look at pho, where you have raw meat that you then dunk, or shabu shabu, where you cook it a la minute. And I think that that's the beautiful thing with beef. It doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be baked potato, cream spinach, glass of wine. It can be chimichurri and roasted vegetables. It can be, my dad, may rest in peace, used to say, I fell in love with your mother for her beauty, her wit, her intelligence, and her charm, but I married her for her steak au poivre.
Priorities.
Yeah, man. Look, mom's steak au poivre is the gospel truth.
Oh, well, I'll tell you 2 things I want to touch on before
Sure,
we put a wrap on this is, and you had actually mentioned 2 of them. The first one I want to talk about, because you'd mentioned In-N-Out, Anytime In and
Yes,
Out
sir.
comes out, I got to ask, did you get it with the green chilies a la Alvin Kylon?
No, and I love Alvin. He broke my brain. I just did it once. I hadn't seen it before. I didn't even know that chilies was like the thing you could get. And he said, and make sure you say, leave the onion whole. Tell him don't unsliced onion. Say it's one slice of onion whole and chilies. And then I saw someone on the gram they had gone to a farmer's market prior to hitting In-N-Out, and they put fresh California avocado on it. And I was like, you know what? That sounds delicious. I know that a fecal Jackson Pollock would lay in my future, but by the same token, who's hungry? And no, but that's the beautiful thing. To be fair, it's almost like a one-to-one comparison, like the double animal style and the, like, let's say, for example, the certified Angus filet. They are almost like the platonic ideal of like what they are, like super tender, beautifully marbled filet, good double cheeseburger with like right ratio of toppings to bun. And then what you do with it from there could either make it or break it.
Yeah.
So like, I feel that I'm sure that there are people who will put gorgonzola on, one of the certified Angus fillets, or they'll put it on barbecue sauce. And look, who am I to say right or wrong? But I think that at some point, why would you get that? Why would you get the double if you're going to then put on bacon and avocado and whatever else? But the chilies, I think, were a brilliant move. Well, first of all, I love Alvin. You know this because I've been on the burger show a couple hundred times, whatever. But it's that balance. You have rich, you have tangy, you have crunchy, you have that magnificent umami oomph from beef and cheese, right? And then all of a sudden, you have that capsicum cutting through everything. That's what makes it work. Why do you put red pepper flakes on pizza? Why, of all Italian meats, like pepperoni exists on pizza because it's salami picante. It's, the oil and everything comes through. And plus, the fat boy in me like always thinks about like Prince Street pizza or artichoke, where you get those little pepperoni cups that are like little Aztec offering bowls of just saturated, delicious fat. And like you get the thing and it's like little tiny, like a little demi-tasse of just oil. You're like, oh.
It's a mood enhancer, man.
Hell yes. Better than Prozac.
That's right. Is the first time that I met you, and this is like, I know you do a lot of like food and wines and stuff like that all the time.
Yeah.
I usually go as a guest, but somehow, and I'm sure at the event, people were like, how did that guy, I was on, there were 4 of us who were judges at the LA Wine and Food Burger Throwdown. And it was you, myself, Tiffany Amber Thiessen, or Tiffany Thiessen, Kelly Kapowski, right? And Seth Rogen. Yeah. So the 4 of us are up there. And again, this is one of those things I'm like, all right, I clearly know somebody. And that somebody is Alvin Kyle. But if I remember at the end of it, because we ate a lot of burgers that night, but Seth quickly had to go. I had heard from down the rumor mill that he got gout or had to go to the hospital for gout after that. Have you ever had this confirmed?
No, I thought, he was just getting mobbed for pictures and stuff. Yeah. I mean, look, let's call a spade a spade. He's arguably the most famous person in the room. And he was on stage, and I remember he was sharing his burgers with his wife, Lauren, I believe her name was, and she was just behind those panels that were behind us. So he'd have some and he'd turn around and give her some. I assumed he was leaving because he wanted just to get out of there. I was unaware that of any medical thing. I don't want to hazard a guess.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you, and it's one of those things we always talk anytime we're talking to people who are from a specific region of the country.
Yes, sir.
We always like to ask them to give us the eating tour of where you're at. Obviously, with all things COVID, the New York City dining, Brooklyn dining landscape looks a lot different than it did a year ago. But
Absolutely.
if you remove all that and you look at, for people who, Lord willing, this all comes to an end fairly soon and people get to travel back to the city, where are some of your favorite places to eat in Brooklyn and New York and Queens and that whole region?
Absolutely. And I really hope that people, if they see, whether it's the Food and Wine virtual events that are happening, Guy Fieri, I know, put together a restaurant fund for restaurant workers. I know that David Chang just did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and won a bunch of money for restaurant workers. And I know that a lot of them are doing to go. It's because it's tough because a lot of these shelters that they're building now in the cold weather, look, I understand why, but you're still kind of eating indoors if they have 4 walls and a ceiling. But it's still, whether you're using, DoorDash, Seamless, Uber Eats, Grubhub, still patronize these restaurants if you can. So that said, some of the Brooklyn classics are classics for a reason. I would say Randazzo's in Sheepshead Bay for calamari, but you say galama. You want galama, hot, roll on top. It's a hard roll. It's a biscuit, they call it, but it's like a hard roll. Really hot, like Fra Diavolo sauce with unbelievable calamari right across from the water in Sheepshead Bay. Peter Luger's obviously is an institution. And I didn't even know until Alvin took me there that they offer a burger for lunchtime only, but it happens to be exquisite. So I would say Peter Luger, and it's, you got to get the cream spinach, you got to get the bacon, you got to get the tomato and onion salad. It's worth it. There's not a lot of very expensive meals that I would say you can take or leave, but it's a pricier meal. It's less pricey at lunch, but worth it, and double worth it. I would say Junior's Cheesecake they're even big in Japan. They're incredible. In terms of other boroughs, and also it doesn't always have to be super fancy. There's a great place in 39th Street called Szechuan Gourmet. Formica tables, vinyl booths, but their food gets a 29 out of 30, just about, or 30 sometimes from Zagat. Incredible Szechuan. I would say Katz's is still phenomenal. Russ and Daughters, both the cafe and the appetizing for smoked fish. They have one now at the Brooklyn Navy Yard as well, but they have smoked fish. They have horseradish cream cheese, wasabi caviar, and they have a bagel called the Meshuggah, which has horseradish cream cheese. They're amazing sable, wonderful fish. Barney Greengrass on the Upper West Side, the Sturgeon King as they're known. But I also hope you go to these wonderful Chino Latino restaurants in Queens, like in Forest Hills. Jackson Heights has amazing Indian food, amazing. Off of Lexington, there's an area they call Curry Hill, which is, almost echoes Murray Hill, but it's all cabs. All the cab drivers go eat there. And so it's in the high teens, low 20s on Lex, and you'll see they're all brightly lit. I would also say, some of the new guys, some of these little trucks are really great that are like popping up, and little tiny outposts. I'm trying to think what else I would recommend. I love Ippudo Ramen in New York, O Taisho on St. Mark's Place, and Kenka for yakitori skewers, I think is a really great place. Veselka for pierogies in the Village, legendary restaurant, open 24 hours for pierogi. I'm trying to think of like little tiny niche places. I know that it's the place that Danino's in Staten Island that Pete Davidson supposedly is working at in King of Staten Island. Danino's in Staten Island, Spumoni Gardens in Brooklyn on Avenue U. You cannot beat Spumoni Gardens. And ironically enough, though, their Spumoni is great, and people talk about their pizza. They do Sicilian slices. Their grape tomato salad is proof God loves us and wants us to be happy. That's phenomenal place. There's a few, but I love going. There's a place on 96th Street. This is the type of place I wanted to think of. My mind just wasn't working fast enough because, quarantine. 96th Street, I believe, there's a place called Flor de Mayo, voted some of the best rice and beans in the city. Not overpriced at all. Great great black beans. And there's a place, and I don't think it's closed, called Perez Caridad on 72nd and Broadway. That's Chino Latino. So you can get, as John Leguizamo says, shrimp fried rice and plátano maduro. So great place. And I recommend trying Chino Latino, where Fat Joe is from in the Bronx, in Castle Hill. They have them. And if you want real great Italian in New York, Arthur Avenue in the Bronx is what Little Italy was. So yeah, those are just a few that come to mind. There's great pizza at Company. This guy from Sullivan Street Bakery, CO period. It's sort of in that Stuytown area. Wonderful pizza. Lucali, great pizza. East Village Pizza. They're the ones doing that double-decker, a pizza on a pizza thing. So it's like buffalo chicken and then pepperoni. So there's a few that are really, really flourishing. And then even in my neighborhood, Alchemy is wonderful for all kinds of stuff. I would recommend Calexico, Blue Ribbon, great fried chicken at Sidecar, 15th Street, 5th Avenue in Brooklyn. It's Chef John DeCourcy. His brother was my old locals bartender, my old local back in the day. They pooled their money and they bought this place on 15th Street, and it's called Sidecar. Phenomenal, Johnson & Wales trained chef. Great fried chicken, and they make a dish called brandade, Brandade, and it's like a whipped fish baked thing. You dip crusty bread in it. Just thank God you're alive. And anytime the great George Moats, the burger and
the burger slide.
George Moats. Yes, he did the burgers. Like, oh God, I love you, Brian, that you know that. He's been doing pop-ups at I think it's called the Aragon Swine or the something like that in like the Bushwick, Ridgewood hinterlands. That happens to be he does a smash burger evocative of white manna. And it's, if you're a smash burger fan, George Moats he's a lovely man, first of all. But I love the Bill Nye science he imparts when he speaks about burgers. It's very seldom you find someone who has that much knowledge, willing to share it, and doesn't carry a bunch of pretense along with it. Mike Puma from Gotham Burger Social Club. Mm-hmm. Oh, and there's a place called Hard Times Sundays near where my dad grew up in Ditmas Park on Cortelyou Road. And it's a bunch of, I think he's publicized this, that I don't think I'm putting anything on Front Street. He himself had been in prison, and he hires a lot of men that have gotten out that are working to reform their lives, and he gives them a chance because he knew he wasn't given a chance. And he makes a hell of a smash burger as well. You can follow him on Instagram at Hard Times Sundays. But I always try to give everyone a little bit of a leg up if I can. So those are some of the places I love. I love Tofu on 5th, the Szechuan, and there's a wonderful sushi place I cannot recommend enough. I believe they're now on 7th Avenue in Brooklyn, called Inaka, Inaka. And we used to buy our fish from the same guy. That's how I found out about them. Superb fish. Great sushi, not overpriced. Really, really effing good. And of course, as a steak guy, I know you know this place, Bohemian. The Japanese steakeasy.
I am familiar, but I have never been there.
It's like eating in someone's living room that's way cooler and more Japanese than you. But it was super, super, super dope. I don't know. Let me ask you one question.
Yeah.
I personally, and maybe I'm a peasant, and I'm not saying this because you're a beef guy, because you've been generous, and because we're friends. I find Wagyu to be overly rich. I find it to be, okay, so when I'm doing a ribeye or if I'm doing a strip that has a little bit of a fat cap and I allow myself to eat that little bit of charred fat, it's one bite out of the whole.
Yeah.
Wagyu, I find it's almost overwhelmingly rich.
Yeah.
A4, A5.
Yeah, I recognize Wagyu's place. but it's in like a 1 ounce, half ounce portion because it's so rich. I'm never going to get a Wagyu steak. Like it is way too much. Like if I'm going to get a steak, you know, obviously I'm biased, so it's certified Angus beef, but I'm going to get something in that either USDA prime, upper echelons of choice grade, something there where it's that balance. You know, I love a good bite of A5, but never in like a steak form.
You know, there is a point of pride, I feel, especially because my shows are in over 30 countries now, about things like Angus beef, that I feel that things like Malapec oysters or Wellfleet oysters, or stone crab or Maine lobster or Puget Island Sound seafood, these are American contributions to the global grocery that can stand toe to toe with the raclettes in Switzerland, can stand with the Wagyus and the Hiroshima oysters, and you know, Ligurian olives and Calabrian chilies, and there is something for me, you know, and this is a kid whose dad served in the Army and whose grandfather served in the Army and uncle served in the Navy. And one of the first things I learned from my dad was how to properly fold an American flag into the triangles, you know, and how to put it up on how we had a flag on our house constantly. That you know, I'm blessed that I have the following I do, especially in the UK and in Australia and in Latin America. But I do feel a tremendous sense of pride and a kinship and a need to champion things like certified Angus beef because it's ours, it's American. And like, you know, you hear about Wagyu, and I remember being in Texas and trying something from a place called Beeman Ranch, where they actually bred the Kobe with certified with Angus.
Oh yeah,
to make it whatever.
Yep.
And I think there's, as someone who is representative of the American table, I first of all, I respect so much what you guys do, but the product could stand toe to toe with, like in Vietnam, for example, the gold standard there is Australian beef because that's where they can get it. The standard for beef, the way it's prepared, I mean, first of all, people don't realize that fajita meant skirt steak.
Yeah.
It means skirt steak. And that the pirate Jean Lafitte is the guy who coined the term barbecue. It was barbecue. It meant, you know, cooked over spits.
Yeah.
So when you go to a parrilla in Argentina, it's skirt. And its skirt is a striated, heavily worked piece of muscle. And I filmed in the San Telmo area, Buenos Aires, and they do a steak called the matambre a la pizza.
Yeah.
And some people say matambre because it's shoe leather, or like from matar, to kill, that like, oh, I'm going to die, but it's always wonderful.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the thing that I love, that in America we can do salt, pepper, leave it alone. One of my favorite steakhouses on planet Earth is a place called Burns, B-E-R-N apostrophe S,
down in Tampa. Oh, yeah.
The best. I recommend anyone listen to this. It's like Disneyland for food. And one of the sommeliers there was really sweet. He said, listen, you want to know what's really great on our steak? Because he saw that I was trying to be a purist. He said, because they've got a compendium of sauces that you can choose from. They have this aged balsamic that is like so thick you can paint a house with it. It's like this reduced aged balsamic that on like their Chateaubriand.
The real deal, huh?
Oh boy, if I'm going to the electric chair, I know where I'm going.
Let's make a detour to Tampa. So
Yes,
in
exactly.
New York, I think they're still doing takeout right now, but have you done Cote?
No, I've always wanted. That's the Korean one.
Yeah, it's
not David Chen. What's his name?
David Shim and Simon Kim.
Kim.
I believe they're doing.
So everyone listening to this podcast, I'm going to be calling Brian when this is done. I'm not even playing. We're gonna definitely have to do this. And so, by the way, is Spinelli's your favorite one to cook?
For me to cook at home, it's actually the culotte.
The culotte.
Yeah.
So you get that big. You get the big full culotte.
Yeah, I'll get the whole. So the gigantic piece would be your whole like top butt, but there's a muscle that would be the culotte muscle. It's just like the top cap. It's about 4 pounds. And I asked the butcher here. I get it from the grocery store here, or our meat scientists over in the lab.
Sure.
They leave me a 1/4-inch fat trim on top, and I'll score it like barbecue. Rub it down with just like salt, pepper, maybe a little like granulated honey, so it's a little bit almost like a Santa Maria style. Roast it, hit it hard in like
granulated honey. Wait a minute, I'm putting that in my phone.
Or sugar, I guess they're interchangeable.
No, granulated honey. Okay, I'm down.
Yeah.
And then what else?
Yeah, and then I just throw it in the oven, crank it to 500, get that nice like crust on the outside of it because I've got a fat cap.
Don't cover it.
No.
Don't cover it.
Yeah, I want to just I want to thrash the outside of that to get that crust. Then I back the oven off to like 300 and let it cruise up to like 120, 125. Pull it.
And you're starting it at what, 4?
Usually usually like 5, as hot as I can get it to get that, because I want to get. It's basically like you're searing in the oven, So just
you do any liquid in the pan?
No liquid in the pan. I do it on a roasting rack and I rub it down with usually like peanut oil or olive oil first.
Sometimes if I'm doing a roast, and this is something that I learned from another great place in El Barrio, which is sort of the eastern area of Spanish Harlem. So I think it's 136th and Lex. If you watch the Harlem episode of Man vs. Food, I filmed there. It's called La Fonda Boricua. The chef there's name is Jorge Ayala, and he does the technical term is a bain-marie, where you put like a pan of water in the oven below that which you're cooking to create ambient steam. He called it baño marino, but he threw in orange and cinnamon sticks and cloves into it, and he did a pork butt that way.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll do that, but I'm always interested. The guy who used to live on the 4th floor of the same brownstone I live in was a chef at Per Se, and I remember he did short rib with oyster sauce, Guinness, and a little bit of olive oil, and that would be the braising liquid. and then I did the similar thing, and then I added root beer to mine. Yeah. And then I'll just periodically bake, because if you do low and slow with short rib, you can look at them and they fall off the bone.
Oh yeah, they're perfection, and there's so much intramuscular fat in that short rib muscle.
And that's where you get that nice sticky, almost gelatin kind of fat that you really render out. That that's the cool thing is I love that every single culture has some variant of potted meat, potted beef.
Yeah.
That whether it's the British meat pie or even the Australian meat pie, which is a derivative. And you can go and get sancocho, you can get different cassoulet. And the funny thing for me was being in Vietnam and filming, and thank God Tony Bourdain was still alive and I could call him, that, to find out that pho comes from the French pot de feu. That's even where the name comes from. Yeah. And so there's these beautiful derivatives that you can find. So I love that you can buy, that people listening to this don't have to spend a ton of money on whatever cut they get, and that you can actually stretch it out. The place that George Motes and I both love is Sid's in El Reno, Oklahoma, home of the onion fry burger. And so El Reno used to be a big railroad manufacturing town, railroad car manufacturing. And then the day and age of the automobile came, they moved Route 66 further south, so then it became Route 40. So the Depression hit El Reno really, really hard. But they had less meat and more onions. Plus, you can plant an onion and grow more onions.
Yeah.
So what they did was kind of brilliant. He put the onion like on a power drill, and then he got a brick trowel, and he cut a notch in it like a cheese knife, and then you kind of hold the spinning onion against this trowel, and it spins, and it cuts off these thin ribbons of onion. You pack in with the meat, and the patty is actually close to 50% onion. The innermost ones sear, the outermost ones caramelize. And it was a way to stretch out your Depression-era meat rations and still create a burger. And it's a burger worth trying because it celebrates the onion as much as the beef, as much as it celebrates human ingenuity,
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. It's almost like you're using the onion as like a thickener, like with rice.
Exactly.
Right. On that note, Adam Richman, the man, there's so many different things that we could term you, right? We can't put you in a box, right?
I like to say gastronaut because I'm a food explorer, but let's just say raconteur and bon vivant.
It's on his business card. You can look him up.
I promise I'll write some American terms on there once in a while. Like my friends will be like, he's a
those who know him best.
You want to know, this is one last thing. This will be my final thought. So one of the reasons I'm still friends with my boys from back in Brooklyn, right when Man vs. Food was taking off and I had to do my very first promo photo shoot, I told my friend Peter, who I've known since I'm 12. And Peter's a very successful finance guy, whatever else. And I love him to the moon and back. Shout out Peter Shire. And I said to him, Pete, I got to film this. I got to do this photo shoot. He goes, what kind of photo shoot are you doing? I'm like, well, it's a promo thing for the network. I guess maybe they'll put it on a bus or in a subway. He goes, I'll tell you something. If I ever see your face on the side of a bus or in a subway station, I'm drawing a large right on your forehead. And I said, God, I love you, because I realized two things. One, I'm always going to have my friends to keep me humble. And two, if I ever see a giant drawn on my forehead, I'll be like, oh, it's Pete. It's okay. It's Pete.
He already called his shot.
What a way to end the interview.
Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, Adam Richman, you can find, oh, real quick. My gosh, I'm a terrible interviewer. What are you doing now, man? Give us a quick rundown.
Okay, so I am in the second season of The Food That Built America on the History Channel. Great show. We could learn so much about the brands that we kind of take for granted, the history, the ingenuity, the setbacks. I find it personally, not because I'm in it, wildly inspirational. So I was in season 1, which you can get on demand. Season 2 is coming out. I have 2 new digital series coming out. The second season of Biscuit Reviews from an American that you didn't even ask for, where I review cookies from all over the world on my YouTube channel. I currently have started a new little itty bitty digital series on my TikTok called Chicken Sandwich Chronicles. I have a series because I'm a bit of a gardener and I teach how to cook and grow stuff, the easy to grow stuff that I grew, called Adam's Garden of Eaton. It's a new series that's going to start this February on IGTV. And I have a new series on the History Channel that I found that I'm officially unallowed to say something until they do, but it's a reboot of a very, very famous franchise on History Channel that I am now hosting. That's what I'm currently filming at the moment. And it celebrates the greatest stuff within American food as relates. It kind of ties back to the Built America series on History Channel. So I've got those, and I have a series that I was filming that COVID shut down, unfortunately, in the UK called Supperman on the Dave Channel.
Glorious. And when you
buy my books, buy my books. They're so much fun.
Amazon?
Really cool. Yeah. The first one's called America the Edible, A Hungry History from Sea to Dining Sea. So you get some of my history, some of the food history. You get recipes with every chapter. There's maps, there's phone numbers, addresses of all the restaurants to go to. And then I made my first cookbook called Straight Up Tasty. Again, I got recipes that are just about flavor. They're not pretentious. They're not douchey. There's one called Spanish Fly. It's a good cookbook. It's fun. You can do it with friends and kids. And there's everything from the entire history of chocolate as a rhyming poem and haiku explanations of cooking to, again, restaurant recommendations along with phone numbers and addresses of the restaurants to go to. So look, whether or not you buy them, it's not about my money. I just want you guys to enjoy your lives and have the type of fun that I get to.
That's amazing. I'll tell you what, hearing all that stuff going on, the fact that you were able to take time out of your busy schedule to sit down and chat with us, man, dude, we are grateful. If there's anything that we can ever do for you, even if it's a simple restaurant recommendation from some of our listeners, please don't ever
hit up Coat for me. But really, and the truth is, and I'm glad I get to say this in a public forum, you've been a true friend. You have been a real tremendous advocate of mine. You've been incredibly generous through the years, as is everyone at Certified Angus Beef. So thank you. Thank everyone at Certified Angus Beef. And, for me, I'd always make time for a friend.
Dude, thank you so much. Adam Richman, we appreciate you joining us here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand.